Welcome back to Value Creation Nation. Everybody, my name is Lane Taylor. In last episode, Gene and Scott brought our conversation back to the customer and made an important point. Price is what customers pay, but value is what they received. We talked about listening to the customer, building long-term relationships, and designing your strategy around actually creates value. And today we're going to take the next step. Companies spend enormous amounts of time, money, and resources implementing new technologies, ERP systems, supply chain platforms, automation, and now, of course, AI. AI is everywhere. But buying the technology is one thing. Actually changing the business so the technology creates value is something entirely different. So today we're going to unpack 3 different approaches companies take when implementing technology. Why so many implementations fall short of expectations and what leaders can do differently when it comes to aligning people, processes, and technology. And with AI moving so quickly, I think this conversation couldn't come at a better time. So with that, welcome back to Value Creation Nation, Gene and Scott. Let's kick it off here and talk about some of the differences before we hit recorded. Scott said, let's talk about some of the difference in old school, new school. So maybe define that up at the top and we'll get this conversation going.
Yeah, no, glad to be back. Technology has continued to evolve. Solutions have continued to evolve. The way you approach the selection to solutions has also evolved over time. So the advent of the ERP system, SAP coming on board, SAP mandated you follow a certain structure, which was the SAP way. Pre-SAP, everybody was doing their own way, their own style. A lot of times it was doing customized solutions so that they could execute their own proprietary processes. The advent and evolution of technology have changed from companies needing to have customized solutions to them being able to go to the marketplace to be able to solve very difficult, very technical, very specific problems using generic industry solutions. With that, the way you approach potentially solving and selecting solution has changed from one where you go and define what you want the system to do, i.e. preparing to customize and create your own code, to defining what the outcomes need to be, what the use cases are that need to be solved, and then going to the marketplace, looking at what's available and determining what solutions best solve your problems, maybe it very differently than what you're doing today, but solve the problems most effectively, most holistically, that you can then lever to use in more of a generic way. The death nail of any solution in the end of the day is customization. It limits your ability to stay current if you're using third-party solutions, to be able to upgrade and stay current with their versions, because every time they upgrade, you have to upgrade all of your customization. So the thought being is, as you think about going out and looking for solutions, at times you need to use it as a re-engineering opportunity, putting aside the way that you're doing things today and being open to look at the end outcomes and basically determining whether the solution that you're evaluating delivers to the requirement from an end outcome perspective. Gene, anything you want to add to that?
No, just reinforce what you said, that you want to avoid customization because of all the things Scott said that go wrong when you do it and more. Going back, it's because I'm older. When SAP came out, it was designed to give companies a prepackaged set of best practice solutions so they wouldn't have to do customizations. Well, it turns out over time, people started doing customizations with SAP. And there's stories about companies like International Paper taking 10 years and $1 billion to get SAP in. So it got out of hand. At the same time, the reason these systems came out with good solutions embedded in was that they were better than the customizations that people did on their own. And so why build when you can buy was the question. And so that's where it started getting to the point where, okay, we're not going to build so much. We're going to buy. So as Scott said, what are we going to buy and why and how's it going to fit?
Every time a consultant enters a new business, the first words every consultant hears is, you got to listen to me. My business is unique and different. And you got to recognize that the way I do things is different than anybody else. That's the first words we always hear every time we enter a business. If you get under the covers and look at the processes from a fundamental building block perspective, they're all the same. They all accomplish the same tasks. Yes, They've evolved through their own culture and their own personnel to basically complete tasks a different way, their own way, their proprietary way. But in the end of the day, they could be completed just as successfully in a more generic way. If a business allows themselves to check their ego at the door, to forget about what they're doing today and the need for what they're doing, and allow themselves to open their mind to the end objectives that have to be accomplished, they would quickly learn that there are enough solutions on the marketplace today with enough varied thinking in the way that they approach problems that they can find a solution that will match what they're doing 75 to 80% of the time exactly like they need it accomplished. What they then have to evaluate is the cost of customization really worth any minor added value that they're going to receive by them adding that on. I have a client right now who's trying to put in a generic ERP, and they keep trying to customize, and I keep challenging them to step back and recognize that customization means ongoing costs that are going to negate any value that they're going to bring by using a industry-wide solution. So, doing the concept of defining best practice in your organization and then going and looking at the solutions is kind of the old school way. The new school way is defining the objectives and then going and evaluating and assessing solutions in the marketplace to determine how closely it matches to the objectives that need to be accomplished, and then determining which route they want to go. Neither of them's wrong. One will make the culture more comfortable, which is the customization route. The other will drive business efficiency and allow the business to stay current with versioning and keep up to date with technology. It's up to the business to determine from a value creation perspective. Again, the nature of this discussion, value creation nation, from a value creation perspective, the business is better served to allow itself to rethink fundamentally what it's doing, to re-engineer its processes, and use any system purchase opportunity as a way to re-engineer their process and challenge the status quo to ensure that things that they put in place are really needed and weren't just put in place because they ran into a corner case situation one time, that executive team overreacted, and now it's become part of the operational DNA and it just burdens the operation.
Right. Now, over time, building on Scott's point, systems have gotten better and better and better. WMS, for example, warehouse management systems are in probably their 9th or 10th evolution. But as they get more complex and do more things than ever, that puts the burden on the company to be able to use it. And so here this is opening up, even as you buy the right system, there's change involved. I saw, by the way, a number from this is a BCG statement recently, and I really embraced it for example. They were talking about AI, but it applies to other systems as well. 10% should be on the algorithms. In other words, how's the system do what it does? 20% should be on the right technology and the data. 70% should be on people and process. And look at that. We have gone almost upside down from what it used to be, where 10% was on people and process. So while I agree with Scott's points here about the best is to buy, there's still change involved, or else the system will not sustain. And that's the big issue these days.
There's one good thing that came out of the pandemic. The good thing that came out of the pandemic was a lot of small solutions or corner case conditions where businesses didn't have the time to be able to basically go and got attacked during the pandemic window. A lot of solutions post-pandemic have come on the marketplace, a lot of boutique solutions, a lot of corner case solutions that answer a lot of the pitfalls of the big players that come on the marketplace. The market is full of solutions that are available for someone to go tackle any operational problem they want to tackle. There's something out there now, and the pandemic gave the market the time to catch up that it needed because it had time to think through and not have to be worried about client pressures to be able to create a lot of the solutions. The challenge isn't today, is the solution available? The challenge, to Gene's point, is the company open enough to the effects of change, the effects of culture, and the willingness to challenge their fundamental processes to re-engineer how they do what they do and to integrate technologies in a way that enhances the team's performance. The biggest thing that causes people to be resistant to technology is the fear that technology means an elimination of headcount. Any company that's the thinking about putting technology in needs to address that straight off if they're going to go and take on any technology initiative. They need to be upfront and honest to their teams about what the net impact will be of any technology they're looking to put in play. Often, it's a redeployment of teams to other tasks that they haven't been able to accomplish because they've been so focused on fundamental business that an implementation of a new technology basically frees them up to be able to go tackle other things that the business wanted to tackle, but never had the time, effort, and energy to go tackle it. So to Gene's point, the business, if they're thinking about technology, needs to recognize the resistance to change, needs to recognize what the impact will be to the business and the culture and the people themselves, and needs to tackle those honestly and openly at the beginning of the initiative, gaining the team's support, input, and change parameters, and not ignoring them. Most implementations I see that fail are where executive management goes off with a consultant. They go and configure a solution. They come back and say, okay, we're ready to implement. I need you guys to go test this out and give me feedback. That's exactly what you don't want to do. You need to include the organization. It needs to be part of a re-engineering engagement. It needs to be part of a change management initiative. Change management is best addressed by the folks that are most directly impacted being a part of defining how the system will work and helping to determine the configuration that will ultimately be delivered.
Yeah, exactly. And just like there's a new way of selecting and implementing, there's a new way of change management. So we probably have to do a podcast on that eventually because it's different than the old ways of change management, which was put people in a conference room and play around on a whiteboard and give them a little demo test and say, okay, go do it. So that has changed. There's different ways now to effect change. And one, of course, is what Scott said, is get people involved early enough that they actually like what they're doing. But there's other ways too. And I think this is critical because we can't have AI is coming so fast. CEOs, aren't going to stand for what they've been paying for, which is a lot of experimentation around hallucination and not getting it ready for execution. So I think we're going to see that changing fast. And the large companies already figuring out how to get AI systems implemented and used in execution mode. So it's going to change. But for those that aren't ready for AI and still doing the ERPs, and there are plenty of them, as Scott pointed out, and other supply chain systems. There's supply chain systems now for every process in supply chain, and often like WMS, there's 4 or 5 different ones. So I think it's good if you're with a company that has embraced technology, and everybody should have been by now, is change is normal now. So you need to be ready for it and embrace it where it should be, and then do the right ways of the implementation that we're talking about today.
So Gene and I have this debate quite frequently, right, about which is the right approach. So Gene, why don't you give your perspective about how you believe an organization should approach the evaluation of a solution and that selection process?
Yeah, it's old school plus. So it's more of a hybrid now. I think in one way it's to prevent customization, and another way it's to make sure there's sustainability in what's delivered. It says, let's re-engineer or transform the process first, how do we want it to work, and then bring the software in that's going to enable that. And the other approach would be get a WMS and then make sure the processes fit the WMS. That to me is not the right way to go. And Scott, you'll disagree. But I think it's up to companies to do the transformation that they want and then let technology enable it.
Okay, so to summarize Gene's thoughts, his first step would be re-engineer the process, define what you want to do, and then go and see how the solutions in the marketplace match the way that they want to do it, and then select based on that. I take the opposite approach, which says, and you've heard me on podcasts talk about this, talk about strategy, talk about outcomes, define the use cases that need to be covered, and then go and apply the outcomes and use cases against different technology solutions to determine which solutions best address the outcomes that are required, and then make a selection knowing that after the software selection is made, that the internal business processes will have to be re-engineered to be able to enable the solution, however it's been created in that software, to be executed. the reason why I have a little bit of rub with Gene's approach is if you're going to rely on a third party solution and invest in a third party solution, that third party is already baked into their solution the way that they're going to approach problems. Going about countering the way that they naturally think about it results in, at some point, conflict between the underlying code and the way it's been approached and the way that you ideally want it to be done. And the result of that is either one, the business feeling like it's got to accommodate and basically put on the side burner what they wanted to accomplish, or they get their way and then the code becomes customized. And that means that every time a version gets updated, you got to update code and they got to monitor code and they got to keep all the patches that they create running and up to date. So those are the two sort of balancing acts, right? One is how precisely do you need a solution to do what you want it to do exactly how you want it to do, versus how do you let the solution stand on its own and how do you make it work the best you possibly can, given the choice you made of the partner and the solution that you've invested in.
This may be oversimplification, but are you saying, I'm saying I want to enable the process. You're saying you want to enable the solution.
I want to enable the outcomes. I always start from strategy first, define the mission that needs to be accomplished and the outcomes.
Yeah.
In technical terms, they're typically defined as use cases. So you establish a business condition and you define at the end of this set of activities, here's what needs to occur. And then you give that to the provider and you ask them, how does their solution deliver that outcome?
Right.
And they then demonstrate how their system operates and executes the business condition.
Okay, so you're right. I agree with that, your word outcome. So I can change mine around. I want to enable the outcome with the process. You want to enable the outcome with the solution. And I think that's oversimplifies, but it gives us an idea about the two different paths to success there. But we might want the same outcome. There's just two ways to get there.
Every operation, as you talked about business, process, and technology, so every operation always has to balance those three sort of legs of the stool. When you're looking for new technology, you're stressing of the three legs, technology is the dominant player in that decision-making process. Recognizing that people, which is the roles they play, the responsibilities they have to do, and the process, which is how it now pieces together, given the technology enablement, all have to change. But when you're selecting a solution, you're letting the technology be the dominant decision maker in that three legs of the stool. And so therefore, to ensure that you get maximum value out of your investment, I prefer to let the technology dictate the people and process so that I minimize any additional coding, any additional impacts, any reason why the technology can't deliver on everything that it can deliver. And I recognize that the other two legs have to be modified. So just like any problem, so I'm going to, if you do a statistical analysis, what you typically do when you're looking at the impacts of any variable is you isolate one variable, keeping everything else stagnant, and you change one element. You look at the impact, and then you change another element to look at the impact to determine what the cause and effect is of the change in that variable. In case of a technology selection, I'm letting the technology be the changing variable, and I'm saying that the people and process will change as a result of that changing variable.
That makes sense, but I'm questioning whether it actually does work that way, because I've seen too many drag out, they don't get used properly in any time frame that's reasonable, and values destroyed and costs go up the line and so forth. So that's my view.
Let's talk about why that happens.
Yeah.
This is sort of me hypothesizing. Why I believe that happens is people hold on to the legacy processes and their legacy roles, and they're trying to force fit the solution to do what they've been doing historically, and haven't opened up to recognize that the people and the processes have to change, and the technology is the stagnant variable. Technology is not the changing element when you're buying a system. It is the stagnant factor, and the people and process then have to become the variable factors that have to be modified to fit the way in which that system operates. Most organizations don't recognize that.
You assume that I didn't re-engineer them well enough, and that's going to show up in either case. You're assuming that the software will make them re-engineer themselves, otherwise they won't be able to use the software. I'm saying that's what happens, and they don't use the software. You train 7 users, you end up finding one, and he's in the back room. So you got to be careful with that, just like you do any other approach.
Well, so again, I'm assuming that if I'm making an investment in a partner, a technology partner, that I'm accepting philosophically how they want to operate the business. That's why I'm making the investment. That's why I'm making them a partner. I recognize there's going to be an impact in the people and the skills that are needed and the processes and how they're going to have to be accomplished, albeit they're all fundamental building blocks and they invariably all have to be accomplished. The sequence and the way in which it's accomplished is what the technology brings. The process itself will be there, but the team needs to get itself ready to recognize it needs to change.
Yeah.
And it's the resistance to change. And what I fear in your approach is the definition of best practices then creates a foothold where everybody sort of plants their feet and says, that's my best practice. I don't want to come off of that. That's the way I want to do it. And system, you need to do it or else I'm not going to buy you. And I think that's the wrong perspective, because now you're overlaying your operation, your philosophy, your approach, and you're basically challenging your provider in the way it's been coded and created. And it's going to cause conflict that is going to invariably end up in custom code.
Okay, I understand. And I think we both agree that we're leaving out a very important role, which is leadership. If I'm in charge and I'll let my process people do what you just said, they ought to all be fired before I am. I think it's a management problem. A lot of it is.
Well, you brought up, why do projects take 5 and 10 years to get done?
Yeah.
That's the reason why they take 5 and 10 years to get done.
Yes,
It's
people
because
agree.
people are resistant to change.
Agreed.
People will exit because they'll get frustrated. New people will come in who are open to the change. And over time, what that's saying is you got to weed out those that are blockers, bring in those that are enablers. And it's that long weed out time that takes some of these companies, which are larger in nature, to recognize it's not a process problem. It's not a technology problem. It's a people problem.
Okay.
And it takes that time for that to sort of come to the surface and for them to naturally exit.
Right on.
Right?
I think throughout, and then if we talk about this in the coming minutes, I'd love to know some examples from some real world experiences with y'all's tenure of change when it comes to technology, good nor bad. So at some point in the discussion, I think that would be good to hear as well.
We have tons of those experiences. Gene, you want to go first?
One of the ways to get change, and there's several to Scott's point, let me just say one that I really like. It's expose the people you're trying to change with those who have changed. If you have a company willing to let you walk through their warehouse and see how their system, not competitors obviously, but to see how their systems work and all the success they've had with it, all of a sudden your people tend to get a little bit more excited than thinking it's just all theory. So that's one way, is to show them real use cases of success.
Yeah, I think what Gene's trying to say is sort of from a philosophical standpoint is people only know what they know. And when they haven't had real life experiences to see things done a different way, they don't recognize that what they're doing can be accomplished numerous different paths.
Yeah.
They just know the way they've done it because they've been trained that way, they're comfortable in it, and they know it will be successful.
Right.
What a consultant brings to the table is seeing multiple firms accomplish the same tasks and doing it different ways, finding some processes that are more efficient than others, and learning bringing those all together to say what's best practice, bring each of these components together, right? And that's where I started the conversation by saying every time we walk into a company, they always say, you got to get to know me. My process is totally different. Don't just tell me your consultant speak because I'm totally different and you got to get to know me first.
Yeah.
Okay, we listen. We hear you, but under that, we're breaking it down into the building blocks and recognizing that the building blocks are the same. How you're accomplishing the tasks in that building block may be different, but the building block you're trying to accomplish are all the same. So an example of that would be, I have a client that worked with that is trying to get a perpetual inventory, but they haven't yet recognized to be able to get a perpetual inventory, you need to have a strong warehouse management system that tracks the status of inventory, the receipts, the put away, the picking, and consumes everything when it's sold. And so they're trying to manually muscle it because that's what they've done through their entire company's career. And they're apprehensive about putting in technology that restricts their ability to, from an entrepreneurial way, just move move stuff around and do whatever they need to do. And what we're working with them on is saying, hey, no, you need to have a defined pick face. People who pick always go to a defined pick face for every item. There's a reserve stock, which could have anything in it, but you know where it is and you know how much you have. And it tracks movement throughout every phase of the process to ensure they have total control. They're resistant because their culture is all around entrepreneurship. So they believe that what makes them special is that any order that comes in, they'll find a way to satisfy that order. They'll figure out how to make a part, how to adjust whatever they're creating to be able to meet the need immediately upon the request coming in. What they have failed to yet recognize is that it goes totally counter to control, goes totally counter to perpetual inventory, totally counter to having placement, consumption, usage, control, which negates the ability to do any kind of demand planning. If all you're doing is you're always substituting, how in the world will you ever know exactly what it is that the customer actually wanted if you're substituting on the fly, right? Being able to do demand planning, being able to run an MRP, a resource planning tool, is all predicated on the ability to define what the true need is and how you would forecast that need going forward. If your history is a muted history with all these substitutions going on and all this variableness happening and all this entrepreneurialness happening, unless you're overtly storing what the true demand was, not what was shipped, but what the true demand was, you'll never be able to create a more sophisticated supply chain that forecasts, drives, makes the picking, selection, fulfillment process more efficient, or even uses the warehouse space more efficient until you get control of your processes. So that's an example where a business, while we talk about the philosophy and the strategy and how it pieces together, has been very resistant because they believe it undercuts what they believe is the culture of their business, which is a very entrepreneurial spirit. And by doing so, they're limiting the business's ability to expand and grow. So, Gene, you have an example you want to share?
Well, unfortunately, I think of too many negative examples, but another one I want to mention, though, because this is likely to come up in the current days going forward. If we have a client or a company that comes to us for help, we figure out, first of all, where do they stand on any transformation they've gone through. If they've already transformed their warehouse operations without technology, we'd have a hell of a time getting them to change it again. So we might have to adjust, which we sometimes do, the implementation to account for that. People can't handle too much change too fast. So it's just something that we start looking more like these days as AI keeps coming faster and faster.
Yeah. I want to move to AI a little bit. I think that may be some that we should to touch to. Scott, I think I interrupted you. I think you were about to say something.
No, it's okay. I think the major point I believe Gene's trying to reinforce is that any solution, system, implementation, or process change has to be effectively managed. It is change management that will determine its success or failure. And to Gene's point he mentioned earlier, senior management has to make it a priority, has to create a burning platform, and has to reinforce that this isn't a nice to have. This is a must have that drives the sustainability of the business and allows us to create fundamental building blocks that allows the business to grow. A lot of times that key messaging is not reinforced to the business.
Yeah.
They just say, hey, I'm going to put in a TMS, a transportation management system, because I want to reduce costs. Okay, reduce costs is a great thing, but that's not really necessarily why you're doing a TMS. Right. You're doing a TMS so you can better align your customer's requirement of service to the cost that it's going to take to deliver it, to determine the best route and the best provider to be able to deliver to the customer requirements at the lowest cost of the business. That's why you do a TMS. And that's what makes a business sustainable, because you flip the script, and instead of being a value creation to the business, it's a value creation to the customer.
Yep.
And it's that value creation to the customer that ensures sustainability of the business and helps grow the business.
Right on. Perfect.
And that's good. If you haven't listened to last episode, make sure to go back and listen to that one, because we did touch a lot on customer value. With AI, obviously me, from the standpoint of being able to listen into these conversations with you both, has just been incredible. And now AI is changing things so rapidly. I think I saw something the other day that just was, the numbers are incredible of the people that are using it, and they're going to be using it in the next 6 to 12 months. It's ever changing.
Yeah.
So from your standpoint, from your lane, from what you all do the most of, what's AI mean to this episode? What does AI mean to the future of system selection and what's really going to happen?
Yeah, we've touched on some of these points. Latest survey shows 94% of the CEOs plan to get into AI. 21% are ready for it. So there's a gap yet, but we're not going to wait years for them to get ready. It can't happen. You'll fall behind your competition. So let's put a little bit of urgency on this. And the problem is there's still so much uncertainty about where AI is best going to fit with you. And they're trying to avoid picking the wrong spots to try to embed it in and use it. This is going to be a real challenge because here you're talking about massive change to workflows and processes from the beginning. So it's a real challenge.
Let me weigh in here for you, Lane, to give you a little. There are different levels of AI. The form of AI that will take hold and is taking hold are repetitive tasks that require taking collateral and basically pulling information out of collateral, spotting the information and allowing that data to be fed into your ERP. That's what people are grabbing hold of. So for example, most manufacturers that are in Asia aren't on an ERP. They're used to getting faxed orders, and they're used to doing fax copies of their manifest and fax ordered acknowledgments or emails. AI is now working to be able to take that hard copy form that's coming in a fax, parse the data out that shows confirmation or the adjustment of the order, and then feed that to your ERP to give you either an order confirmation, order adjustment, or an updated delivery date based that compares to your requested delivery date. Those kind of repeatable tasks that clerks used to do in the past, that's where AI is going to get its first traction, because that adds value in the supply chain in being able to speed up the rate of decision making and acknowledgement of what will be delivered and what won't be delivered when. What AI is going to force businesses to do is understand their processes, understand the algorithms, understand how their systems compute and manage the data and come up with its answers, and then understand the data that's pivotal that has to be managed, and either get an AI bot to deliver those and or provide custom algorithms that introduces additional elements to be able to make the forecasting, the precision of the forecast heightened based on what's important to that business. But from an employee's perspective, AI is not something to fear. AI basically, as I look at it, takes away a lot of the clerical tasks and allows a human to basically do the synthesis and add the value in the algorithms and the analytics to be able to understand how to manage the business better. I don't see AI taking over business management. I see AI helping to analyze and recommend decisions. But I still see, in my vision, the human is the ultimate decision maker and has the responsibility to challenge what's been recommended and then make the decision based on that recommendation. And what's happening right now is too many people are accepting information they're getting from their AI tools as though it is correct. AI is giving a lot of bad information because it's consuming everything that's written. It doesn't know how to parse good information from bad information. It doesn't know how to overlay all that information to your environment. So AI can be helpful in managing sources of data and helping to do clerical things, but the human has to be smart enough to understand how that data is used, how their systems work, and then make the ultimate decision to manage the business.
I saw something the other day, Gene, before you have a point. I saw something the other day. It said, you know how Wikipedia, you can go on and change Wikipedia. It's a public site. And I saw somebody, it was a meme or something that said, well, I read it on Wikipedia and I put it in ChatGPT. So this absolutely has to be true. And that's a good point. It's like, what if we're pulling facts from Wikipedia, that's public. That's not, what is that? Is that not facts or is that fictional? So I saw that the other day.
It's the same thing as when the internet came. It's on the internet, must be correct. So we're going through that again. No, I think Scott is exactly right. And what the experiments are showing, the more you ask AI to do, the least trustworthy it is, because it doesn't have what it needs to make the right decisions. So
the more detailed the problem you're posing to it, the more you have to challenge it, because it doesn't know your environment, your variables, your situation. And the other thing that's really important, the way you phrase your question. is extremely important.
Yeah.
Right? So, what a lot of people, if you know how the system works, if you really understand analytically the problem you're trying to solve, the way you phrase the question is critically important to the way in which you're going to get information back. So, don't think you can use colloquial terms. You're going to be out there querying against people who are using terms very technically. And so, you need to be very cautious about how you phrase something to make sure that you're phrasing it in a way to give you the answer you're looking for.
I saw a cartoon. There's a guy painting a fence, and he painted a vertical and then a half. And they said, let's have AI finish the fence. AI painted a vertical and a half, a vertical and a half, a vertical. And they just basically repeated what it was given. So it's so true.
Let me give you an example, Lane, why this is important. One of my past roles, we were looking at lead time because we were trying to determine how we could reduce inventory. So we did the normal approach, which is take all of the values of lead time by lane, do the mean and standard deviation, define the confidence interval that you wanted to manage, and then use that value. What we learned is that when you do that, you get all these anomaly situations that sort of get interjected. Times in which your customs got hung up for some reason, or for some reason the boat was delayed getting to the port. And so when you look at the variability, it's the extreme conditions that affect when you're doing a statistical analysis. We tried to parse off looking at outliers, but even when we did that, the one-sided confidence interval was giving us a really large lead time amount. So what we ultimately did was we ranked the values from highest or longest period to lowest period, and we said we wanted to have the 95th percentile. We took the 95th value, and that became the lead time, which was a much lower number than if we used a statistical analysis. So it's being able to understand how the math works, why it's doing what it's doing, what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then how you can defend it to the organization rather than just saying, hey, I know some statistics. I'll do a one-sided confidence interval, and that's got to be right because who's going to question statistics? It doesn't always work. And you got to have enough acumen to know what the impact is, to know how much additional working capital you're potentially investing in if you use an analytical approach that doesn't apply properly.
Yeah.
That's a real life example that really happened.
Well, any last thoughts as we land the plane on this one and technology and the selection and what we talked about a lot today. Any last second thoughts here?
I guess mine is technology is here to stay, as we've implied and certainly talked about. And everybody who works for a company needs to get familiar with it because it's going to be the future. It's not going to run autonomous companies, and it's not going to take over all complete jobs, to Scott's point, but it's going to be there to help decision support go better and faster.
Yeah, I would encourage any organization that's considering a change in any aspect of their technology to use it as a re-engineering project. Recognize the impact it's going to have to the business. Take off the handcuffs of forcing someone else's technology to match your process, because invariably it won't. It's customized. Your process is customized because that's the way you configured it. Use it as a re-engineering process. Take away the boundaries of the functional pyramids. Recognize that the process will probably be done differently tomorrow than it is today. And if the business is open to the value that IT can bring and the solution can bring from a change management business process re-engineering, they will reap the benefit of the technology versus trying to control the benefit of the technology and causing it to be sub-optimized.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, gentlemen, thanks for letting me sit on another conversation of the Value Creation Nation. And if you're listening to this right now, guys, make sure you go back and listen to a few past episodes. Again, we've had Corey Weeks on the show. We've had Jeff Moon. We talked about Canada and China. Spoiler alert, we may be going to another country to talk about them in the coming episodes, and I'm very excited for that. So, Dean and Scott, thanks so much for letting me sit on here. And if you're listening to this and if you're on Apple, scroll all the way to the bottom, give us a 5-star rating and a 5-star review. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And let me tell you, if this episode has added value to your life and or your business, make sure to share it with a colleague. It's pretty easy to share it nowadays with technology. I'll use the word technology right there. So with that being said, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Value Creation Nation. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks all.